Hi, and welcome to this video. And this video is all about learning to learn, and it's about feedback. Now, feedback's really important for you because observing with a critical eye and giving and getting feedback is a really important part of your learning process. Observing together with feedback develops your skills and knowledge as you begin to interact with your study materials and you start to recognize what works and doesn't work. Now, this is a vital part of improving and developing your communication skills. And here, doing business English, it's a part of developing your communication skills in English. And there's no question today that communication skills in English are really desired in many jobs and many careers. So let's talk about feedback. So let's have a look at 3 good reasons of why learning to give and to get feedback is so important. And the first point is giving and getting feedback and learning to do this is simply a life skill. There'll be no question in your life that you'll be giving and getting feedback from all kinds of people. In your work, this could be your colleagues, it could be your boss, it could be your employees. In your personal life, it could be with your friends, it could be with your partner or your children. And it's really worth learning this life skill and developing this life skill. The second point is that giving and getting feedback will be a necessary part of your business career. So you should learn to do it well as soon as you can. An example that we saw was on the video that I did previously about performance management. And what we learned about performance management is that a good manager is able to give constructive and balanced and productive feedback that's based on evidence to help his or her employees to achieve their goals. And the third point is to do with your learning. And learning to observe critically based on your knowledge and your processing of knowledge will help you and helps you to develop your own skills and your own authentic style. Thinking about what you've learned, interacting with materials, they're just simply much more effective ways of learning than just listening and sitting passively and listening to lectures all day long. Okay, so let's come on to 5 tips on giving feedback. And my first tip is be honest. Don't aim just to be nice in giving your feedback. If you make a comment, say you're giving feedback on somebody's presentation, and you say something like, "I really liked your presentation," this is not really helping the person. You're not really giving that person data, information or insights that will help them to work on their next presentation and to improve their performance. In fact, if you say something like, "I really like your presentation," and you didn't like that presentation, then this is even worse, and you're not helping yourself in giving feedback and you're not helping the person who's getting the feedback. So be honest. And that brings me on to my second step, or my second tip, which is, yes, be honest, but don't set out to really hurt somebody or to offend them. And one of the ways that you will hurt or offend somebody is by concentrating on the person rather than the performance and the behavior of that person. Now, in your studies, you will get to know people more and more as you go through the studies. But think about the people that you're giving feedback to. Is that person, are they very shy and reserved, and you may need to work on them getting feedback? Or is that person really outgoing and really open to feedback? You may find with some of your colleagues and your peer groups that you have to work on giving feedback step by step and giving more and more critical feedback as you go through the process. Forget about whether you're a friend of the person or you're not a friend of the person, but concentrate, as I say, on this performance and behaviour. And then my third tip is be balanced and try and be constructive with the feedback. When you're watching somebody giving, for example, a presentation, it's very, very, very unlikely that somebody's performance is going to be completely bad or it's completely good. Try and think about what were the positive aspects for you and what were the negative aspects for you and what were the things that were kind of so-so, and try and give this balanced feedback and give feedback from different points of view. And then my next point, number 4, is be very clear and be very specific in your feedback. Don't be wishy-washy. Again, if you give somebody feedback and you say, I really liked your presentation, there is not much information or many data points to work with here. It's not really helping you giving the feedback, and it's not helping the person receiving the feedback. So let's have a look at the example of presentation and look at another comment that you could make about a presentation. I really like the way you signposted and structured the presentation. When you move from point 1 to point 2, you said that was the general picture for X. Now let's focus on Y, which I felt was really effective and increased the primacy recency effect. Now this is not only helping the person getting the feedback, but it's helping you because you're applying the lessons that you've learned in a practical way. And this is far more useful than just sitting in lectures and listening passively all day long. Interacting with your materials and working with the materials and processing the materials means all the time that you're learning, learning, learning. And my fifth and my final point on giving feedback is the why. Concentrate on why you're giving certain information and data points. What's the evidence? What supports the argument that you're giving for the feedback? For example, if we go back to this example with presentation, the person gives an example of the point and the phrase that was used and explains why that phrase was useful in structuring the presentation. So here are my 10 tips on getting feedback and dealing with feedback when you receive it. So my first tip is welcome the opportunity. Having the chance to give and get feedback and learn how to do these things is really important for you. It will help you develop and you'll grow, and it will really help you to learn. At the same time, you'll be developing a really important skill. And as we saw before, this is both a management skill and a life skill that will be useful to you both in your business life and in your personal life. And my second tip is related to the first point, and that is don't get defensive, be open. Now this is sometimes it's much easier to say than it is to do, but concentrate on the feedback and concentrate on the data points that you're getting from the person giving feedback. Learn a little bit to be able to distinguish between subjective comments and objective comments. We talked a bit before about the why. What are the objective comments that are really based on evidence and are really helping you to perform in a better way? Subjective comments sometimes they're really useful, but be careful about taking on board personal comments or comments that are too subjective. Subjective comments sometimes can say much more about the person giving the feedback than the person getting the feedback. So let's come to my third point, and again, sometimes this is easier to say than it is to do. But my third point is, or my third tip is, listen carefully. If people are giving you a feedback, they're trying to help you, they're trying to help you develop. Try and focus on the feedback that you're being given. And then this brings me to my fourth point, which is one of the things that can really help you to listen carefully and to focus, is simply to take notes. And notes will be really useful to you because we'll talk about reflecting on feedback, self-reflection in a later tip. And notes will be useful for you because you can go through them, and you can go through these notes and you can go through it in your own time and in your own environment. Now, my fifth tip is, yes, it's really important to listen, but when you're listening, then if something's not clear to you, then ask questions. Maybe the person giving you the feedback has some suggestions that will be useful for you. Try and create a dialogue rather than just letting the other person give you their feedback in the monologue. When we talk about dealing with your professor or dealing with your lecturer, then I think an interest in your personal development will encourage others, so the students or your professor or your lecturer, to share tips and give you advice that will just help you get better and better and better. And my sixth tip, which is connected to asking questions, is at the same time clarify any feedback if you feel this is necessary, especially if you're doing this in another language. I was often giving feedback in the university that I worked in, I was giving it in English. So don't be afraid to clarify this feedback, simply if that's saying something like as simple as, I don't understand. So just say things like, so when you say X, Y, Z, what do you mean exactly? I don't understand your point about, but could you explain this in more detail? To ask for repetition or paraphrasing. Repetition is really connected as well to clarification. Paraphrasing is when you don't understand something and you ask somebody to put something into other words. So again, we could give you a few examples here. So repetition, could you go over that again, please? I didn't quite get that. Could you repeat it? I didn't understand. Could you put that into other words? Tip number 7. Thank the observer for the feedback. Now, this is really, really, really important. The person has gone to the time and the trouble to give you the feedback, and you may have learned something about yourself that was really valuable, and it'll be valuable to you in your later business and your personal life. Just simply, even if you don't feel like it at the time, realize the person is giving you feedback. This is not an easy job always. Be grateful and just simply thank them. And we just talked about self-reflection. Self-reflection is take the time to go through the feedback. Think about the feedback that you've received and go back quietly through things in your own time and environment. This is related to something we said before about subjective and objective comments to a certain extent. And this is the tip of learning to accept and reject feedback. Now, accepting and rejecting feedback as part of your self-reflection, this is part of you developing your personal style. You don't have to take every single comment on board. Now, if we take, again, presentations as an example, sometimes when people are giving feedback on presentations, it is very difficult to differentiate between subjective and objective comments. What some people like in a presentation is what other people don't like. We say in English, one man's meat is another person's poison. And in going through your feedback, you're going to have to take some of this again on board, and you're going to, as you work with feedback and you develop your skills, then you begin to learn to accept and reject these comments to a certain extent. So let's take an example again for a presentation. So say, for example, you're in a study group of 10 people and you've worked with written feedback in reports and you've taken some notes and you're working with this feedback in your own time and your own environment. And there are 9 other people who are giving you feedback, and you go through the feedback and you realise that 9 people are saying to you, I really didn't like the structure of the presentation, or the structure of the presentation wasn't clear to me at all, or I got a little bit lost in the presentation because I don't think there was a structure. Now, if 9 people have listened to the presentation and 9 people are telling you this, there's probably something there, and there's something there for you to work on. And one of the things I would go back then is maybe go back to my presentation and have a look at it and think about structure and think about what I could have improved in making the structure clearer in my presentation. Now, another example with this could be you go through the feedback from the other 9 people in your study group, and 8 people comment very favourably about the visual story that you've tried to use with your visual aids in the presentation, and they comment on how much they like your visual aids. And then one person makes a comment on one visual. Now, this is an example of maybe rejecting the feedback. Again, you might want to think about the feedback and think about, well, maybe that visual didn't work in that place, and you go back to your presentation and you go back through it and you think about what the other 8 people have said, and then you look at that one person's feedback and you look at how you feel about the presentation and how you feel about the need for that visual to be in the presentation, and then you might decide that you're going to reject that feedback. And this is all about the process of learning to accept and reject feedback. And my 10th point, or my 10th tip, is when you've got the feedback and you've worked with the feedback and you've gone through this period of hopefully self-reflection, then I would set personal goals for my future learning and my future performance. So now we come to the final part of this video, and the last question that I would ask here, or that maybe you're asking, well, is how do I give feedback in lectures? Well, the first thing I would say is that if a lecturer asks you to give feedback, then I would do it. As we've said many, many times, what you're doing is helping the person improve their own performance, and in the process, because you're interacting with materials and you're working with materials, you'll be learning and improving your own performance. So if the lecturer asks you to do it, then I would do it, and I would do it in the way that the lecturer asks you to do it. Some people ask for a verbal report, or some people ask for some kind of written report when they're giving the feedback. If you're asked to do it, then do it. It could be that you're asked, again, if we come to presentations, you're just asked to look at one aspect of the performance of the person who's giving the presentation. The lecturer might say to you, well, can you look at the overall structure of the presentation and the beginning and the end of the presentation, and you concentrate on that. So whatever you're asked to do, then I wouldn't avoid giving feedback, I would simply do it. Now, lots and lots of people, when they ask people to give feedback, they ask them to do it in speaking, in a verbal way. And it can be really useful sometimes to do feedback in a written format. I think this can be really productive. And asking people to give, it can take a little bit of time in lectures, but asking people to give short written reports is really useful for the person who's getting feedback. Because if we go back to this period of self-reflection, then the person can take all the reports that they've been given and go through these reports and go through it and think about this aspect of rejecting and accepting comments. Again, some people will just be more comfortable giving feedback when they're asked to do it in writing rather than when they're asked to do it in speaking, especially when it's in a second language, if you're using English as a second language. Now, if your lecturer only concentrates on giving verbal feedback, then why not suggest from time to time that you do give written reports, and to do another way of giving the feedback. Now, the other extreme might be that your lecturer never gives feedback at all, or you never get feedback from your other colleagues, or your lecturer never asks for this. Well, if you want feedback and you want to work with feedback, then I would ask the lecturer to give you the feedback or to provide feedback sessions in the lectures. If this is impossible and the lecturer is really unwilling to take the time to do feedback in the lectures, then go out and get feedback from your peers and your colleagues and your other students in your study groups. Ask your friends for feedback. If you ask them for feedback, they'll give you feedback. And you'll encourage a whole climate and a whole atmosphere of giving and getting feedback. Another thing you can do is form study groups, and you can make up your mind in your study group of 3 or 4 people that you're going to give and get feedback for each other. Personally, as a lecturer, I always liked it when people asked me for feedback. When they genuinely asked me for feedback, I felt that they were asking me to help them improve themselves and develop themselves. So let's have a look at some comments here. These are the kind of comments that I would react very positively to. So, can you give me some advice on how I can improve the next time? Can you point me to some exercises so that I can understand this point better? These are the kind of things that I react to, and I think other people would. You would react very positively to them. Now, this is very different to justification. So going to your lecturer or going to your professor and then saying something like, well, on this paper, you've given me a grade D. And I don't think that's fair, because when I was in school, I was really good at English and I always got an A or a B, and I think that you've given me the wrong grade. Now, this is not asking for feedback. What you're doing is trying to justify getting a better grade and trying to get a better grade. And this is not really helping you to improve, and it won't encourage the lecturer to help you to go through this period of development and growth. Feedback is very, very positive. The more you do it, the more you'll benefit from it. The more you practice it, it's like anything in life, the better you'll get at giving and getting feedback. And the more you do that, the more you will improve and improve and improve. So thanks a lot for listening to this video. I hope that you find this giving and getting feedback really useful to you and a really useful learning tool. Please have a look at my other videos, and maybe you want to have a look at my playlist for the Business English course for a B2 C1 level. If you've got any comments or you've got any questions about this video or anything else, then please put it down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.